What's going on, everybody? Welcome back into the channel. Today we're going to be going over my store championship deck list. I was able to win the store championship for Star Wars Unlimited at Cape Fear Games. I played Yellow Sabine, as you see here. We're going to be doing a deck list video a little bit different than normal. The main reason being because I just want to keep the deck list on screen in full capacity. When we do future deck lists, we're going to go back to the way that we used to do them, but I wanted to kind of just do it this way just so we can see every card at once. Also, I want to apologize for not being able to put out content as frequently as I would like. A lot of things have been going on, but we're back and we're going to be, more consistent going forward, at least 1 to 2 videos a week, because I am in full-time school and all that type of stuff. So yeah, here we are. We have Sabine Yellow. I ended up playing Sabine Yellow. We were able to, we get that store championship Mace Windu promo as well as the other ones as well. We already had a top 8 finish, as you guys know. We were playing red Sabine that time, but we went to yellow this time. Originally supposed to be Cassian Yellow, but the morning of I ended up jumping ship and going to Sabine Yellow just to see if it would prove to be beneficial, and it seems to have been. We were able to pick up the W, and it's funny though because in my 12 packs I was able to basically, I texted my friends and said, hey, listen, if I get this certain card showcase in my 12 packs, I will run this leader in the New York, because I'm going to be going to a New York store showdown in a couple weeks. So I said, if I went ahead and I pulled in my 12 packs, the Cassian and or showcase, I know it's a really big glare, but surprisingly enough, of course, the one that we pull is the Cassian. So we are going to be running Cassian for the New York showcase showdown. So, let's get excited for that. If you guys want to see the deck list I will be bringing to the New York showdown, let me know down in the description, in the comments down below. I will show that probably prior to me going out to New York, and we'll do a deck list video like we did, and how we usually do it, right? This is just gonna be a little bit different because it's a special video of just me talking about my deck, and then my matchups. I'm probably gonna go over my top 8 matchups in depth, but kind of go over my round robin, in the normal talking way. But as you see here, right, the big thing with Sabine is that she gets consistent damage on the base. Yes, you are taking in damage into your base, but still her speed of her deck, you can go ahead and use that to your advantage. If you're ever going up against a deck that has 25 HP, use it every single time because you are already ahead. Just keep ahead and just keep on doing as much damage as possible. So, and the big thing with Sabine is her coming out only requiring 4 resources, keeping up with her speed. So again, just a very fast deck, and what yellow does is that it allows you to lane dodge probably better than any other color with Sabine. You get the Millennium Falcon, like you still have your normal ships, right? Your space units like Green Squadron A-Wing, Red 3, Wing Leader, and Alliance X-Wing, which I don't have in this deck list, but in the future I probably would end up throwing it in because I will talk about cards that I feel like weren't necessary in this list itself, right? But with the addition of Millennium Falcon to those units, you just get more ability to lane dodge and just kind of get around your opponent, right? So some of the big things I want to focus on in this video, right, are some of the combos and big cards, right, that I kind of like in certain matchups, right? And before we get into any of that though, Rebel Assault you see up there as a 2 of, I would actually, in Sabine Yellow, I feel like in Cassian Yellow, it does better, right? I think in Sabine Yellow, it is not needed. Off aspect, you're only paying 3 to be able to tackle 2 of your rebels, but still, you want to play more cards if possible. So if you can get a surprise strike or a sneak attack in 1 turn rather than spending 3 for the Rebel Assault, it felt a little better. So Rebel Assault in my new deck list is going to be scrapped when I'm playing Sabine. No Rebel Assault. Also, it was the first card that I ended up sideboarding. It made sideboarding really easy for me, at least, because I was like, oh, Rebel Assault, I'm not really using it. Let's just go ahead and chuck it out, right? So just know that Rebel Assault, in my opinion, in Sabine, it's just not needed because you want to kind of do other things, right? One of the cards that, like one of the combos, especially on turn 1 that I like to do, right? We have Leia into either R2-D2 or Spec Force Soldier. Now, R2-D2 is obviously the better play because you get to play Leia, then you get to ready up your resource, and then you get to go ahead and play R2D2, and then allows you to kind of look at the top card of your deck and figure out if you want it or not, and it allows you to cycle through your deck and get to your plays better suited for your next play, right? So oftentimes I would, play out that R2D2 and then hope that I get see, a surprise strike or a fleet lieutenant is the next draw to be able to play and then pump up my units and to get out some big attacks. So that's one of the turn 1 plays that I did really like. Obviously, you're looking at Sabine and you're looking at Green Squadron A-Wings as your like optimal turn 1 plays, but also keep in mind, I'll go over a little bit later when I go over one of my matchups. Sabine is better than Green Squadron A-Wing sometimes, and Green Squadron A-Wing is better than Sabine probably most of the time, but there is a certain matchup where, Green Squadron A-Wing, Sabine is better than Green Squadron A-Wing, but still, those are kind of like your 2 units that you want to go ahead and, get up, first, right? You get Sabine or Green Squadron A-Wing on turn 1, and while you have the initiative, you feel pretty good about that, right? Other cards that kind of came in clutch, right? Spark of the Rebellion, definite 3 of, just because against certain decks, right? You're playing against a mid-range deck, Heroism Green, you know that U-Wing reinforcements coming down when they have 7 resources. So more often than not, they might be only trying to keep 1 in hand, putting other ones down as resources. And if you can have initiative when they have 7 resources and pop that thing out of their hand, then they can't flood the field. Really good there. Against Control, trying to prevent Vigilance, Super Laser Blast, things like that from being played. It's just one of the big things when it comes down to matchups, in my opinion, is knowing the matchup, knowing what you're playing up against. And Spark of Rebellion, it gives you hand knowledge, and then also if you know the matchup, you know the turns of which they are waiting for to play their big cards to kind of swing things. So Spark of Rebellion is just really good, especially when you know what you're playing up against. Sneak Attack, another card that I want to talk about. It's super strong because of the potential combos that you can do with it. Against control matchups, I love to do Sneak Attack K2SO on turn 2, swing it to base if I can, if there's no Sentinel, and then blow it up. That's 7 damage right away on turn 2. Is just really, really strong, especially if you have a unit on the board that can swing in for 3 and you're swinging for 10 right then and there. So that's really good. There was also another play, again, knowing the matchup. I was playing against Krennic Green. I went ahead, I had Sneak Attack out there. I played Sneak Attack. I had my Green Squadron A-Wing out. I Sneak Attacked out my Fleet Lieutenant. Fleet Lieutenant came out readied, but I got to swing with my Green Squadron A-Wing, hit him for 5, and then I went ahead and swung with my Fleet Lieutenant into his base. I got a total of 8 that turn. Not quite 10 like K2SO, but still a pretty good amount. And yes, you have to get rid of your unit, but I do feel as though on turn 2, it doesn't feel as bad with Sabine, because on turn 4, you will be getting Sabine out as a unit, and so you're going to kind of make up for that in a little bit, right? I have, as my 3 drops that aren't Fleet Lieutenant and ground units, I have 4 Fighters for Freedom, and I have 2 Rogue Operatives. Now, both have Saboteur, which is really nice, so you're not going to be slowed down on the ground by those Sentinels, because they both have Saboteur. But I do feel like you can argue that it's too many 3 drops, right? Because you're looking at Wing Leader, you're looking at Red 3, Millennium Falcon, and then the 2 ground units, which I just spoke of. So you could probably go ahead and scrap one of these, and I would probably scrap out the Fighters for Freedom. And the reason why I say that, although I do like Fighters for Freedom, and I think it goes really well with Cassian, which is what this deck was originally, right? I think that this deck operates well enough to where the Rogue Operatives at 2 of is good enough, and then the Fighters for Freedom can kind of go out, and I can go ahead and throw in those Alliance X-Wings. So if I go ahead and I take out the Rebel Assaults and the 2 Fighters for Freedom, and I throw in 3 Alliance X-Wings, and I throw in maybe another Wing Leader, I think that this deck would be a little bit more optimal in the way that it runs, because more often than not, the 3 drops that you're going to prioritize are your Red 3s, your Fleet Lieutenants, and your Wing Leaders, right? So late game, throwing down a Rogue Operative, or if you have nothing else, you throw down a Rogue Operative. It doesn't feel bad to swing into the base for 4 on the next turn, but still, you have other 3 drops that are more priority. And so I feel like running, right now we have 9, we have 12 3 drops, and I think that was a little bit too clunky, right? And yes, we were still able to take down the store championship, but you know, you always have to play and like upgrade what you're thinking of, right? So in my opinion, as you're going to see on the board here, I would take out the 2 Rebel Assaults and the 2 Fighters for Freedom, and then I would throw in another Wing Leader or Rogue Operative, whichever you want, and throw in 3 Alliance X-Wings, give you more lower cost cards to then go ahead and play. And also it adds more space so you can get a little bit more consistency with your lane dodging, right? So that's kind of with that. Lothal Insurgent, a good card, especially because we have a ton of low cost cards, especially if we make those switches where you're going to play something before we play Lothal Insurgent, and sometimes you're able to hit that big card your opponent wants to play that turn and it stops their entire plan. It's always a good feeling. It's just good to have in your back pocket. Another thing I want to talk about with Leia, not only on the turn 1 play, but being able to have it in your back pocket as well to exhaust maybe a leader that you don't want to get their ability on, or just a big thing swinging into your base. It might give you that protection you need to kind of make sure that you can live a little bit longer, which is always nice. So that's pretty good. And then again, right, you have your wing leader. You can go ahead and boost up your units against other aggro matchups. This is probably your turn to play, because if you have the initiative, you can go ahead and get it to the point where they can't take out the unit on the board, and then, you know, start swinging it for 5 essentially continuously and stuff like that. The wing leader is really good, especially in the aggro matchup. Red 3 is really good because every unit in this deck list is a heroic unit. Okay, so everything's gonna be getting raid 1. It makes red 3 an automatic priority for your opponent to deal with, which then gets your opponent off from, you know, thinking about attacking into your base or maybe taking out some of your other units. It kind of gives them protection for a turn, because red 3 more often than not will be almost immediately taken out, if not the turn played, the turn after. But they have to use their resources to do so, so that's a good, you know, little distraction there. Again, Millennium Falcon being able to come out readied, it's a good killer, right? If you have it on your final turn to swing into a base and kind of take them out, or just being able to, again, if you're playing against the aggro matchup and they play, you know, a space unit, right, on turn 2, right, if they play Green Squadron A-Wing, you can go ahead and play this and it's ready, you can take it out, right, stuff like that. And that's what makes it kind of hard to deal with certain decks with this deck, because Millennium Falcon is just so good. And then, for a cause I believe in, we all know what it does. Reveal those cards on top. What makes this card so good is that you get to set up your future plays. Now, yes, we are playing Surprise Strike and Sneak Attack. So those are the only 2 cards out of Heroic Aspect that might slow down for a cause. But still, those 2 cards are definitely needed. It's only 6 out of the 50. And yes, occasionally you will hit 3, but it's okay, because you're still getting that 3 damage and setting up your future plays. And then the K2SO, really, really good, again, with Sneak Attack. It's just getting it out and ready to swing into your opponent's base, and at the end of the phase, it blows up and it deals out even more damage. I had a play where I played Sneak Attack, I brought out K2SO, and then I had the 1 extra resource, because it was when it was 4 resources. I used Heroic Sacrifice, and I hit the base for 9. So it's just really good, and I got to draw a card. Always a plus, right? It's just Heroic Sacrifice with K2SO. Again, a really, really good combo in itself, but adding on Sneak Attack so you don't have to wait that turn to attack with K2SO is just really good. And K2SO, like Red 3, is another unit where your opponent has to kind of deal with them and figure out the way how they want to deal with it, right? Do they want to allow you to swing into their units and get overwhelmed damage to take out their units? Or are they just going to use their removal and just take the 3? It's probably the best way to go about it. But still, K2SO is just really, really good. And then I played 1 Chewbacca, and, you know, that's for the aggro matchup as well. Having a Sentinel and it readies when it's hit. It's just actually pretty good right there, right? The sideboard, as you see over there, I have 2 Wolf for the control matchup. It's just, you know, stops them from healing on attack and on play. Just really good there. And it's a Saboteur. We all know I like Saboteur. Bamboozle. Now, Bamboozle is really good when you... Because I feel like one of the things that I really struggled with sometimes is when my opponent played in space and got that wing leader, and then they would just hit my base for 5 consistently and just outpacing me, right? You play Bamboozle, you exhaust the unit so you don't get to attack, and they lose all their upgrades. They don't go into the hand because they're EXP, right? They're experience tokens, so those don't go back. But if there are other upgrades on it, those your opponent won't get back to their hand. But still, like Devotion and stuff like that, Bamboozle just works really well in this deck to kind of get around those scary moments, right? Disabling Fang Fighter, I felt like as a one-up, it might go up because, you know, you can argue that maybe I don't need some other cards, but Traitorous, scary to have to deal with, and Disabling Fang Fire kind of destroys that. Also Entrench, Disabling Fang Fire. Only having one of, a little bit scary, but still. We have Cunning. You have to pay 6 to play it, but in certain matchups I felt like it was okay because I can exhaust things, I can bounce things back through my opponent's hands, giving one of my units +4 attack for the phase, which is really strong. And if I want my opponent to discard a card randomly, that's always an option as well. But I felt like that was okay in matchups that I knew that were going to go longer, and my opponent was maybe going to drop down a U-Wing reinforcements. Maybe I can exhaust a couple of those units on the next turn and then still be able to swing in with my units and kind of keep up with that. It's maybe not the best sideboard card, but I felt like it did come in handy for me a time or two. I have a second Chewbacca just in case I am again going up against the aggro matchup and I need to, you know, play another one. It's just good. Being able to re-ready whenever it's hit is pretty good, and it's oftentimes going to take more than one hit, so it's not too bad. And then I have Change of Heart. You know, when your opponent plays something that costs 6, right? If Fetch Fire Spray, right? Fetch Fire Spray comes out ready on that turn, boom, you drop down Change of Heart, and you swing that 5 damage into your opponent, which is always fun. But still, being able to take over big units, taking over a Luke, and being able to heal your base, which is pretty good, and swinging into one of their units. The optimal play is to take over something, swing into their unit, and blow them both up. That would be the best thing. But still, being able to even swing into a base, because again, you are going super fast, that might be enough to win the game. And I just feel like this deck is it's so fast. The ability to basically make adjustments mid-game. So like, there were times when I started off in space, then they played the Bright Hope in space, and I made the complete adjustment to just hop down into ground and just start an entire ground assault and winning that way. So the deck is so good. And yes, we all know it's good because it's been doing well with a lot of people, but also knowing how to play the deck is important as well, because there was someone at the store Showdown who was having trouble with this deck playing against Krennic Green. Now, hopping right into my top 8, I ended up getting 7th, right? So I had to go ahead and, you know, work for my store Showdown victory, right? But that being said, you have in my first matchup Krennic Green, and someone came up to me and he was like, he has a hard time with this deck playing against Krennic, and it surprised me a little bit because I feel like this deck does really well against Krennic, but still, all in all, it's just really fast. You just have to know where to play and when to play your units. I think that his big thing is that he didn't understand, like, when Child Sin came out, it was a lot for him to kind of deal with. And I'm not gonna lie, oftentimes I kind of just ignore Child Sin. And just once Child Sin comes out, it's either I bamboozle it, get rid of the experience tokens, or I just go into space and then I use Leia to tap it down so I don't keep repeatedly taking 6 into my base, right? But again, I was 3-2. My 2 losses were against Han Green. This deck struggles against Han Green, but I will kind of go over something in a little bit. Obviously, I played Han Green in the top 8, in the top cut, obviously. But so my first matchup was Krennic Green, and you know how Krennic is. The healing and all that, trying to control the board. It was, it's a good deck, very strong. But this deck against control, I think that you can really outpace. Now, the problem with Krennic Green is the healing, right? After game 1, I ended up sideboarding in my Wolves, which did come in clutch game 2. But still, when playing against Krennic and other control decks, right, my optimal turn 1 play is actually the Leia readying up my resource and then playing another 1-drop. So in game 1, I was able to get the Leia and the R2-D2 combo and kind of go that route, and then start playing down my 3-drops. I did get a sneak attack into K2SO on turn 2 to get 7 damage, and then really when you start to get that much damage in on Krennic, even when he comes out on 5, it's hard for him to kind of keep up with it, and being able to, use Sabine's ability repeatedly to make it so Krennic was only healing 1, kept him at bay, especially in game 1, right? Because I had Wolf in game 2 to kind of keep him even more at bay. One of the things I do want to talk about is knowing what to trade into Sentinels, because I was the person who wanted to kind of talk to me about, you know, what's the best way to get around in a Childson and other Sentinels like that. You have to know what you want to trade in and when. Trading in a smaller unit and then kind of finishing it off with another unit is really good. You know, your Sabine Wrens, whether it be the leader or the unit, can go ahead and swing into a, you know, a Sentinel and then go ahead and split the damage and still get damage on the base. Oftentimes, I would choose Sabine, the leader, to swing into Sentinels to finish them off, because you don't get the choice to split up the damage, right? And I felt like that was okay, right? Sometimes you would need the full damage from Sabine unit to swing 3 at it and then kind of go that way, but you don't have to fully trade. So there were often times when I would kind of give up, you know, Sabine Wren as the leader unit over one of my units on the ground, because yes, I would go ahead and swing, I would get that 1 damage in on the base, Sabine Wren would go back down as the leader, exhausted, but next one I can then go ahead and keep using the ability, and then I can go ahead and attack with my other units on the board, right? So it's just, I prioritized using Sabine Wren leader unit to clear out the Sentinels if possible, while keeping my readied up units intact to attack the base, because again, you don't get to choose the split with Sabine Wren leader unit, right? So you get that extra 1 damage, and then she goes right back down as a leader unit, and you can go ahead and continuously deal damage on the base using her ability. So that's one of the things I wanted to kind of talk about. And then again, with this deck, when it comes to Sentinels, there are a good amount of Saboteurs, so you don't have to worry too much about it. Also, having K2SO with Overwhelm is a good candidate to swing into Sentinels. Even if he does die, he blows up and does 3 damage to your opponent's base. So knowing that, you know, just those are the things that I kind of use against the Krennic player who had the Sentinels, who kind of tried to slow me down with the healing, you know, knowing the matchup, because someone I know who plays a lot of Krennic, we have a lot of matchups. He's very solid, but it got me really ready for that matchup. And again, Wolf going into my Rebel Assaults was my main sideboard immediately in game 2, and it paid off. So that's kind of the route with that. My next matchup was actually the Han Green. Now, this is one of the ones that I want to talk to you guys a lot about, because Sabine, I feel like the matchup against Han Green is a rough one. I had no trouble, like, because mid-range is good, right? And against this deck, if they play it really well, mid-range should be able to handle this deck decently well. I know there's lane dodging and stuff like that, because in my first matchup, I had Boba Green in round 1, and I ended up completely dismantling them, just being able to just completely avoid his units. And then I was able to focus on his base while he couldn't ready up resources because he couldn't take my units out. So I was able to kind of get around the Boba Fett Green. I think this deck is good against Boba Fett Green. I think that Han Green is a hard deck for this to deal with, because if you have the initiative, my turn 1 play for Han Green is always dropping down Sabine unit, right? If you have to choose between Sabine unit and Green Squadron A-Wing, you always go Sabine unit, because the ability to be able to play Millennium Falcon on turn 1 with Han Solo, to swing in and take out your Green Squadron A-Wing, you are set back so much. You really can't, like, you can come back from it if you play really, really well and you have the right cards in hand and stuff like that. But he has a Millennium Falcon on the board with only 1 damage on it, and then, you know, he's just going, right? It's just a hard matchup, but I was able to take the top 4 I played against Han Green. I was able to take it 2-1, and again, it was just about going really fast. The big plays is that sneak attack K2SO, swinging in over his Sentinels, dealing overwhelm damage, and then blowing up and still getting even more damage on the board, kind of controlling, and the lane dodge does come in clutch here as well. The main thing is, like, he'll play a Bright Hope, and then I'll go complete ground, and then, you know, it's just then using my Millennium Falcon to take out the Bright Hope, and then when he starts getting his ground units, going right back to space. It's just knowing how to play against things, and I think the fact that it was my third time playing against Han Green that day, you know, you start to really pick up some things that you have to play, you know, a little bit different and, you know, go that way. Obviously, I took out Rebel Assault and I threw in some Change of Hearts. And the reason I threw in some Change of Hearts is because if he ended up getting maybe his Han, I can go ahead and swing with his Han, or, you know, I can go ahead and take over his big things, because the person I played Reinforcement Walkers, so being able to use that for a turn to heal myself rather than him healing his base. He played Home 1. If I was able to get Home 1 and just swing with all my Rebels to heal up as much as possible, right? So I felt like Change of Heart in this matchup was pretty good, and so that was really all I ended up switching, because I kind of wanted to keep, you know, the units. I also thought about throwing in Wolf against him, because when I played against him in the first few rounds, there was he had in game 2 3 straight turns of Reinforcement Walker, and obviously I can't come back from that. So I was thinking about throwing Wolf in there, but I chose not to. I kind of just went with the Change of Heart play. And it worked out pretty well, obviously. We ended up winning and going into the championship matchup, which we then went ahead and played against Palpatine Blue, surprisingly enough. But he was a very solid player. This one also went 3 games, and the thing that ended up winning me the game is I had Green Squadron A-Wing. I did buff him up with Wing Leader. The only problem with Wing Leader in that matchup is that it's really easy for him to kill it, because all he has to do is use Palpatine's ability and he pops Wing Leader. So I was never able to do damage with Wing Leader, but it buffed up my Green Squadron A-Wing to the point where on the final turn I was able to, he got up to his 6 resources, and I knew the Vigilance was coming and all that stuff was coming, right? And all I did was I dropped down a Surprise Strike, and yeah, I was swinging for 8 and I finished him off. So again, I was just a little bit faster. The game where he stabilized and was able to kind of put down big things to kind of stop my small things, that's where he won in game 2. But I was able to, you know, just continue the speed and sneak attack K2SO again. Came in really clutch in this matchup. Again, against the control matchup, turn 2 sneak attack K2SO is just so good. 7 damage in on the base, especially when you know your opponent's gonna be healing a lot. Getting that damage really, really fast and really early allows you to, you know, play a decently paced after the fact and still keep up the pressure, especially with Sabine, right? So those are the matchups. I can go in more depth if you guys would like with this deck list, how I usually do it, but I just wanted to kind of talk about my experience in the store Showdown. The main thing is like you just need to know your matchups, and it is a little bit of luck, because again, I ended up going 3-2 in the, you know, the matches leading up as 5 rounds, right? I went 3-2. My only 2 losses were against Han Green both times, but I was able to get 7th place at 3-2 because of the tiebreakers and stuff, and just getting into the top 8 gave me that opportunity to play for the championship, right? And then I might have gotten a little lucky with my matchups. I went against Krennic Green, who came in 2nd place, but Sabine Wren being an aggro deck against control, a good matchup, right? Han Green, not a good matchup for me, but I was able to pull that one out thanks to my, you know, my crew cheering me on, right? You know, shout out to you guys. And then, you know, the final matchup is another control deck, another good matchup for me. So yes, you know, knowing the matchups does work. You know, I knew a lot of what I was playing up against, so I kind of knew how to go about doing my turns and stuff like that. But also a little bit of luck went into it, because playing 2 control decks in my top 8 matches did kind of help me get to my victory. But, you know, again, I'm just really excited to bring you guys this deck list. Again, it's very similar to a lot of things out there. This started off as a Cassian Yellow, but I ended up switching over to Sabine morning of. We got those Mace Windu promos, guys, and for the New York one, if you guys want to see the list, I'll put it up next week. I'll be working on it, and I'm playing Cassian. I'm not sure what color yet, either yellow or green, but if you guys want to see that list, let me know down in the comments below. I want to thank you guys all for tuning in again. Thank you for all the support. As always, I want to apologize for not putting out content as of late, but we're going to change that. We're going to be more consistent going further. And without further ado, we're going to go on and get out of here, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.